Hello there. Today we're going to talk about group influence. We'll start up with a little discussion of we're affected and the way that we get affected by the presence of others. Then we're going to talk about specific behavioral changes that occur in the presence of others. And then we'll talk the opposite side and say, well, the individual also influences a group, right? So we're not just influenced by the group, but we also influence the group. Okay? So what is a group? All right, interesting definition. Two or more people who, for longer than a few moments, interact with and influence one another and perceive one another as us. All right, so it's us versus them. So college students tend to form groups, and they tend to form groups with other students. Troublemakers tend to find each other and make groups with other troublemakers. So we tend to in an interesting way, we tend to find people similar to us, and then because of group polarization that we learned at some point earlier, because of group polarization, we tend to become even more like each other and come together. Okay? So, very interesting people. All right. So, why are we affected by others? I mean, shouldn't you just act the same as in any other situation? Well, one of the possible explanations is this idea of evaluation apprehension. That is, we might be concerned about how others are judging us, right? That, like in Driven by Distraction here, where some of our cognitive resources, a limited pool of cognitive resources, and some of those cognitive resources are drawn away into considering how others think about us. Okay? So the conflict between paying attention to others and paying attention to the tasks that you're supposed to do creates this arousal. So we're going to talk about the arousal that groups form. Well, a kind of a cheat here, but I'll give it to you. Perhaps we're influenced by the presence of others because of the mere presence. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. Okay, it's a big cheat, but here it is. Okay. We seem to have an innate social arousal mechanism. It's just like an evolutionary mechanism. We're going to discuss a couple of cases where the presence of others affects even ants. Okay, and so if something is occurring at the level of an ant and at the level of a human, you start to think that's probably related to evolution, right? It's probably something that's pretty darn deeply rooted in our background. Crowding is a little bit different than just being in a group, right? Crowding increases arousal, and some people, that's a good thing. Now, we're not talking today, but you know that optimum arousal theory. I guess we did. We talked about that in like topic 3 or something. And so everybody's got an optimum level of arousal, right? And so what happens is crowding can have the effect of bringing you, if you are feeling under aroused, crowding can help you raise to your optimum arousal level. If you are over aroused, crowding can make you go crazy. Still remember the first time my wife and I went to Manhattan. And I'll tell you, we were living in Long Island. She grew up in a major metropolitan area. I grew up in farm country. So going to Manhattan was like torture to me because the crowding created so much arousal in me. I was just over aroused. My wife, on the other hand, she gets off the train in Manhattan. I'm home, you know. Oh my goodness, what's wrong with that moment? All right, so here's what's also going on is in front of a crowd, even a well-learned response can be altered, okay? Even something that you're so good at. And so basketball players, in fact, or in basketball, I don't watch basketball, but I do know this much, that if you are the home team, and the opposing team is throwing free throws right now. Free throws ought to be a very well learned skill for these professional basketball players. But the home team crowd will just burst up and create a situation of so much stimulation to try to push the player up beyond their comfortable arousal level, create over arousal, and in affect their performance. Okay. Well, we see though that theater directors and sports fans will often tell you though a good house is a full house. So you know there's some of that. This was an interesting study right here. This was Calhoun's rat universe, rat utopia. Okay, he created this design here, this layout, and it's kind of a hard picture to see, but you see it's a great big giant cage for rats, and there's 10, 20, 30, 50 rats in it. And then what happens is they're fed, given as much food and as much water as they possibly want. Okay. And you can see that there's little stairs to connect these quadrants here. So you see, what are they? Oh yeah, they're labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can see a little ladder between 1 and 2, a ladder between 2 and 3, and a ladder between 3 and, what was that up there? 4, I guess, right? That would be the last quadrant. But there was no connection between 1 and 2. And because of this, the rats tended to congregate in 2 and 3. And so there was a lot of overcrowding that was going on in 2 or 3. And so Calhoun looked at this. So what we find in compartments 2 and 3, infant mortality rates was as high as 96%. Okay? We find that the female rats couldn't build nests. There was just too many other rats around. Male rats got weird. They exhibited odd behaviors. They would go in and eat the babies and stuff. It was just really gross. Now, clearly this crowding doesn't do this to humans, but really crowding is not the natural state of humanity. And remember, I had told you at some time that the natural state of humanity was to live in groups of approximately size 20. Okay, there was no situation that you would be crowded shoulder to shoulder. It just wouldn't happen in our ancestral past. We're just not programmed to live like that. And inevitably, this crowding creates arousal, creates stress hormones, all kinds of issues. Well, one of the very first, I think he was the first social psychologist, was Norman Triplett. And he found that children would reel string faster when they were around other people than if they were alone. Okay? Also find a bicycle racer's time is faster when they're competing than when they were alone. And so Norman Triplett put together one of the first principles of social psychology, social facilitation, which originally meant the tendency of people to perform simple or well-learned tasks better when others are present. So this social facilitation is a pretty fundamental and big idea. Okay? We find social facilitation, remember that whole cheat that we had before? The mere present cheat? Yeah, it's a cheat. Don't let anybody tell you it's anything but a cheat. All right. But check this out. An ant will excavate sand faster if there are other ants watching. Okay? A chicken will eat more grain if other chickens are watching. Or a sexually active rat will be even more sexually active if they have an audience. All right? I don't even know what the website would be to find that one. Okay? Don't ask. I don't know. But yet still, cockroaches, parakeets, greenfinches learn mazes more slowly if being watched. So given this idea, and similar findings from humans, by the way, except for maybe the second, I don't know, I didn't do that study. So instead, social facilitation has come to take on a slightly different meaning. The current meaning is sort of like, in the presence of others, it creates social facilitation, creates arousal. Okay, this arousal, if it is a very simple task that you are an expert at, then this arousal is good, because the dominant response on a task that you are an expert at is to do the right thing. However, if you are just beginner, novice, the dominant response is failure. Right? And so when you get aroused, then the dominant response of failure on a very hard task becomes more common. So one of the classic studies, I don't even know with all of the words I have here, but one study they did was with pool. They took professional pool players, gave them an audience, they got better. They gave amateur pool players, gave them an audience, they got even worse. Okay, so clearly what's going on here is the presence of others creates an arousal, and this arousal facilitates the most dominant response that is available. Okay, so in the next little section, we'll talk about some specific behavioral changes that occur when other people are around.